Welcome Home, a podcast for veterans, about veterans by veterans, is a project of Willing Warriors and the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run.
Good morning. I'm your host, Larry Zeliak, Director of Culinary Services here at the Warrior Retreat at Bull Run. And I want to thank everybody for joining us for this. This is the last episode of Season 2, and I have a very special guest with us today, retired Army Colonel Peter Baker. I've known him for quite some time, and I realized in my previous episodes where we were talking about transitioning, I had inadvertently been focusing on enlisted, and I thought that it would be great to have Peter come on and talk to us a little bit about the difference, because there is always a difference between enlisted separating and officers transitioning. So, Peter, welcome to the podcast.
Well, Larry, thank you for having me. And I think what you're doing here and the whole retreat and the whole organization is a real service to our veterans. And for those who aren't familiar with it, I encourage you to look up Serve Our Willing Warrior, and if you're local, you can become involved with it. It's a great organization doing great things.
Yeah, we are very fortunate. We have such a strong volunteer corps, and many of which are veterans who live in the area. We do have quite a few veterans, almost 55,000 veterans living in this area here in Prince William County and Loudoun and Fairfax. But so let's begin with talking a little bit about your career, when you went in, what you were doing, when you got out, why you got out. So start from the beginning.
I used to have a boss who told me that's always a good place to start. Amazing. A lot of times that people would start in the middle or at the end, but it's commissioned 1983, and for some that may be like a century ago. I retired in 2010, 27 years active duty. Again, 2010 may seem like a century ago for a lot of people. For me, it seemed like a few years ago. Time does go fast.
Yeah.
I never intended to make the military career, but I got into it, and people join for a lot of different reasons. I joined for educational opportunities, paid for my undergrad, and I'm paying for my grad school as well. But I think the most difficult part, whether you're enlisted or an officer, is deciding when to get out.
Yeah.
Perhaps your enlistment time is up, and you have to decide whether to re-enlist and stay in, or you've gone the length of your tour. And there's various reasons to get out. It's a very personal decision. And I found a very lonely decision.
Mm.
Hopefully nobody tells you, hey, you need to get out. So, and even your family, who has been raised, my boys and my wife, they're used to the tempo. So they didn't matter if I stayed in or got out.
Mm.
The decision to leave the military, I think, is for me, it was the most probably difficult decision, because there's no wrong answer. There's no indicator saying you should or you shouldn't. And it's very, very personal. But once I made it, I still doubted myself for quite a while.
Mm-hmm.
In the transition, again, there are some similarities. I'm sure there are differences between enlisted and officers. And I'll talk about my experience and why it may be dated. I think it's still relevant. There are a few things I think you ought to be involved before you ever leave. And where do you want to retire to? It may be where your current duty station is. For my case, I had two boys in high school, one just started in college. I decided to stay here. In Northern Virginia, there's also a lot of opportunity in Northern Virginia, and not far from my hometown. But you may want to move, and you may want to check out, if you're not moving back to your hometown, you may want to go there on a vacation on some leave and start looking at that. You can do a lot of this online, look at the housing market. But if you're going to retire where you're at, then that makes it a little bit easier. Also encourage those who retire, most bases, whether what service you're in, have a retirement ceremony.
Mm-hmm.
I retired out of the Pentagon. My retirement ceremony was at Fort Myers, Virginia. And I encouraged everybody, even prior to coming here, I was stationed in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And I encouraged everybody who was retiring to go to the retirement ceremony. If you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for your family.
Mm-hmm.
It's one of the last times you're going to be in uniform. It's going to be the last time your children, your wife, your husband are going to see you in uniform, or your parents. And do it for them. I ended up doing it as well, and I'm glad I did. So I really encourage do their retirement. So, and as you're doing this transition, I found out recently that it's still the same as it was when I was in. You can transfer your GI Bill to a family member.
Yeah.
I just talked to a Navy captain, Colonel 06, who retired. He's been retired 4 years, never knew about that. Make sure you attend all your retirement briefings.
Yeah.
You don't know what you don't know unless you go.
Yeah.
And I highly encourage it. When you get retired, or when you retire, go through the medical process. I had the American Legion assist me to submit my paperwork. They're professionals.
Mm-hmm.
They know it. It's routine for them. You could do it yourself, but you'll do it for the first time. You may get it right, may not. There are different organizations, veteran organizations that will assist you with this. Again, mine was American Legion, and they were wonderful. Easy.
Yeah.
Highly encourage that. You may get some disability benefits you don't even know about. And that goes much more, the disability benefits goes much more in the disability pay. It goes to the VA loan if you have a disability. So highly encourage that. You have to prepare for a transition to retire or leave the service before you leave the service.
So what was the catalyst for you? What was the point? I know, did your career field have a re-enlistment bonus?
No.
Okay, so neither did mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a buddy's son was having dinner with one time. He was going back and forth about, was he going to re-enlist? You know, he had like 12 years in, I thought. And he wasn't sure. And then he mentioned, he was an Air Force sergeant, and he mentioned that in his career field, which he worked with satellites, there was a $62,000 re-enlistment bonus. I said, but you're out of your mind if you don't re-enlist. You know, for me, and as for you, they just said, you know, fine, howdy do, and here's a ticket home. But if you're in a career field that has a re-enlistment bonus, I think you really do have to give some pretty serious consideration to that.
And I will make a plug here too, and I'm glad you brought that up, Larry. I really didn't appreciate the medical benefits when you retire. And there's a difference of retiring before 20 and after 20, and it's significant. The military benefits are significant. I would ask some of your civilian friends who are not veterans or who don't have that medical retirement. It's part of our compensation. If you hit 20 years, you're eligible for it, and it's significant. My criteria, and again, it's very individual. I had a good friend of mine said if he works for two people in a row that he had a hard time with, he'd retire.
Yeah.
I was going to be looking at it's 27 years, and I had two boys in high school, and didn't want to move the family again. And I wasn't at the point in time where I was going to go and take a geographical bachelor tour. I think I felt as though I had fun, and the opportunities for me to transition were probably good now.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit of hindsight. It turned out very well because there was a company that was just starting to form the time I was retiring. But it again, there's no wrong answer. It's a gut feeling.
Yeah, yeah.
I would solicit the people who you work for, get their input, and let them know you're thinking about leaving. They may have some insights. You know, they may say, hey, well, I want to hang in here for another 2 months if there's a promotion board or something.
Yeah.
And talk to your family. They may have some very definitive ideas for it.
I like the idea of talking to those that you work with and who you work for, because they may have connections on the outside. They may say, my cousin's looking for people. You've got a security clearance. You can't let that go. It's golden in the Northern Virginia area. So you never know who people know.
Right.
And so don't make it a secret. Don't try to say, oh, I don't want anybody to know I'm leaving. You know, I don't want a ceremony. I'm going to put my time in. I got early leave. I'm out of here. You know, I'm short. I got a month and 2 days. So because once you leave, you left. You're gone. You're on your own.
Right.
You've got to do everything for yourself.
Right.
The military is not there to give you whatever you need.
Yeah.
And so it can be a little daunting. What was it like for you when you left, when you came out?
I'll share a little story. So I was after duty. I'd go to Korea for an exercise. I've been there. Multi-focus lens is one of them, but I've been there quite a few different times. Never staged, but I was there. And you go, you're in the military, you land, there's someone there at the plane, greets you and says, follow me. You know, everything's taken care of. I retire, and my son is living in South Korea. So I go, I get off of the plane. There's nobody there. Like, nobody's there calling my name. So I said, well, just go over here. Yeah. So your part, when you separate from the military, you're alone. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
I was just alone.
Nobody give you a ride.
No.
Nobody tell you where, okay, here you are at Willits, you know, and the chow hall's over there.
Right. 20 million people in Seoul, and I was alone.
Oh, I get
So I started thinking about it, and you got to tell people, and my boss and other mentors I've had and coworkers, you know, they said, well, they didn't really have a definitive answer. You know, maybe you ought to stay or maybe you shouldn't, because to them, I was coming up, I could serve only until 30 years as a colonel.
Mm-hmm.
And I wanted it to be my decision. I didn't want to say the Army says, well, you hit 30 years, now I have to leave, which is fine for others.
Mm-hmm.
And they want to serve as long as they can, and that's fine.
Yeah.
But I finally made the decision, and in that transition, as I say, go to all the briefings, everything else to prepare you for it, and let everybody else, and you're going to hear one word, Larry already mentioned it in sense, networking.
Yeah.
And it starts before you leave, just as you said, you don't know what people know and what they're looking for. But when you do, and now you're on terminal leave, I would encourage you, I just sort of stumbled upon this idea because you run into people at various places at times, and you get talking about this or that. I went ahead and just went online, I had a business card, my name and my telephone and email address. So if I run into somebody, we start having a discussion about employment or opportunities or whatever it may be, I had something to give to them.
Yeah.
And they had something that they could take away, and I would take it, you know, get the material where they can write notes on the back of the card. And that's just a tangible connection you have.
Yeah.
And I found, I don't know if it worked or not, but I at least felt as though I was putting myself in the best position to stay connected.
Yeah, it can't hurt.
It cannot hurt, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's very, very expensive. And friends that I knew who worked for companies while I was active duty, and they heard I was retiring, and they said, hey, you ought to consider this. And so, and then you apply.
So how did you find your career field and what you had done for the bulk of 27 years translating into civilian life? Well, how did that go?
This is probably a significant difference between enlisted and officer. At least as I'm an artilleryman, and I would say I didn't have any hard technical skills.
Mm-hmm.
Most of our enlisted do have hard technical skills, even if it's in HR, or they have some marketable skills that they learned in the Army. As an officer, leadership, it isn't completely one-for-one transferable. There are plenty of opportunities to succeed in that, and there's also maybe an opportunity. A lot of people will gravitate towards what they're comfortable with, what they've been trained in. And a lot of people in Northern Virginia go work for a defense company.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of them out there. They're large, they're small. They're always looking for people. Somebody current mentioned that the security clearance, very valuable. And that's a well-worn path. But you may also want to look at this opportunity to do something that you're passionate about. A friend of mine retired as an artillery officer. He was a colonel, and he decided to go teach math.
Oh.
In high school, and he wanted to be a baseball coach. And that, for him, that was his retirement job, teaching math and becoming a high school baseball coach. Others want to go in business for themselves.
Yeah.
So it's an opportunity that very few people ever have to recreate themselves professionally. When you're looking for a job, it's because you need money, or you're younger and you have to get a career going, or you have some obligations. But now when you serve 20 plus years, you have an opportunity to look back, and maybe you and your spouse want to do something together in business, or so I throw a wide net and really reflect upon what you're passionate about and your skills and what you can afford to do or afford not to do. Again, I didn't have the technical skills to market myself, other than I ended up going into business development. Again, very well-worn path for officers,
mm-hmm.
for a defense company. And I knew about the defense company only because I had known one of the civilians, vice president there, through the Army work, which is casual Army work, and we got to know each other.
Mm-hmm.
Again, it's just coincidental. They started a company here in Northern Virginia at the same time. I was like, transition. Two things I would say. One, everything's negotiable.
Mm-hmm.
In the Army, it's not. There's no negotiation in the Army, not at all. And if things are negotiable, maybe salary, it may be a company car, it may be working from home nowadays, 2 days a week. Be creative, and especially if you're looking at 2 or 3 or 4 other people, companies, and they're going to give you offers, then maybe you want more money, or maybe you want more flexibility, or maybe you want more vacation time. So I would say push the envelope and say, until they say, well, we really want you here, but we don't really allow 60 days of vacation next year.
But they may allow 45. And you don't know that.
You don't know that.
Right.
And that's why it's always negotiable. Well, you can work from home 3 days a week or whatever it may be. Again, you got to get a little creative and find out where you really want to be. And maybe you want to go to work every day. There's some different values. There's, again, no wrong or right answer for that.
Yeah. So
negotiate with that. And it's much more than just about money. The other thing is get ready to slow down.
Mm-hmm.
The one thing it was frustrating, and in the Army, and I'm sure it's all the other services, there's certainly a hurry up and wait.
Oh, yeah.
But you sort of know that, and decisions can come quick, and then the execution may take a little bit, but in the civilian world, I found decisions are slow. Even when you think they have all the information, that you just need to make a decision and let's get on with it. And that includes the hiring process.
Yeah.
There is a season to hiring. It pretty much follows the school season. A lot of people tend to hire large hiring in late spring.
Mm-hmm.
That's probably the most significant one. The next one is in September, August, September. And then there are others that will do it in January if that's their new fiscal year. But it's also a timing there. Now, I think I applied for the job in May, and I got an offer in September.
Mm.
And we solidified and agreed to terms by October. Summer is a different meeting in the civilian world.
Yeah.
And people are going to take vacations, leave, and they're going gone, and they're not nearly as in a hurry as much as you are.
Right. Yeah.
So I would just temper your expectations. The military, in a lot of regards, you're on a boilerplate in the military. If you do this, this is going to happen. And you know what reactions, and it's not the same in the civilian world.
Right. Right.
Patience.
What's the one thing you miss the most about the Army?
Oh, I think this is probably, again, camaraderie for sure. Yeah. At all levels.
The tribe.
Yeah, you're really, and that's one of the things why I joined the Army, why I joined the field, I tell you, why I stayed. You're really on a team. You're not doing anything by yourself in the Army. You're part of a team, and you're contributing to that team, and its significance, and you have great teammates, and you accomplish things together. You're part of something bigger than yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That can certainly happen in the civilian world. In the corporate world, it can, less of an opportunity, but it does. I ended up being on a small team that we won some contracts, and I ended up bringing different values to the table. One guy had the technical expertise of the product. I had the tactical expertise. I could talk to the customer about what they wanted and what they didn't want.
Mm-hmm.
Gave credibility. So when we're talking to the customer about this product, and then someone else had the budgetary. So as a team, we did very, very well. And I realized that, I did have, again, not hard technical skills, but I had knowledge. And that's another thing I discovered. I didn't know how much I knew until I left the Army.
Yeah.
And started talking to other people. Say, yeah, I know about this program. I know about that program. I know about this product. I know the goods and bad about this product. And so that became a valuable asset that I could provide to the company and actually to the customer.
Well, nobody sells product better to the military than ex-military.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple. And that's why all these contractors and all these companies in Northern Virginia, business development is a wide open field because they have the expertise to make the product. They have the expertise to do the software, to do everything. it doesn't matter how good your product is. If people aren't buying it, you're not going to be around very long. And that's a perfect field for an officer, really.
You're absolutely right. I mean, I know everybody in the military knows what works and what doesn't work. And then what doesn't work doesn't stay around long if it ever got there to begin with. Yeah. And what works well, you got just a handful of competitors that are going, and you're going to be able to separate those competitors, maybe by cost, maybe by performance. Performance may be range, maybe weight, it may be other things. But that, you're right, when you've been in the military long enough, and you bring that tactical expertise to the table.
Yeah. Yeah. If you haven't used that product, you've seen one probably pretty similar. And, you know, it worked, it didn't work. It didn't work at the time we needed it the most. It's usually the way it goes. But, well, I'm with you. I think most veterans will agree the thing they miss the most is the tribe. It's the people that they served with. You know, I got out in 83, and I'm still in touch with a lot of them.
Oh, right.
You know, it's a closeness that you don't get in civilian life. And I think it's one of the reasons why some veterans have trouble transitioning.
No doubt. I mean, I have friends who got out, let's see, 83, they got out maybe 87. I'm still very much contact as well. Knew them since 83. And we have shared experiences in the military. On that team, you go through the same weather and the same heartaches and whatever the sadness part of it or the victories, the losses, you share that. Mm-hmm. And that's what part of being a team is. When you leave the Army, you're no longer part of that. And any victories you may have are going to be shared by, if you're self-employed, by you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Or a very few people.
Yeah. I was self-employed. And the only benefit that I could see to that for me was I was Employee of the Year for 7-8 consecutive years. I mean, it was a record. There was no doubt about it. But it just didn't seem to impress many people.
Just a few other things that just jog my memory. Other things you can be prepared to do is join organizations, whether veterans organizations, something that you find interest in. Again, do it genuinely, but it all goes part of networking.
Yeah.
And there's also professional organizations there, not just the American Legion I mentioned before, but the MOA, Military Officer Association of America. Yeah. They offer resume reviews that are free for everybody. And they offer a job fair at least twice a year throughout the country. Certainly they do in Northern Virginia and D.C. And take those opportunities to go there. Have your resume looked at. And again, now it's different now. It's all digital.
Yeah.
So you gotta make sure you have the right buzzwords in there so that the computer picks up on it. And when you do land that first interview, think about what you want to say before you get there. It's just, again, it's like going in front of a promotion board or going through a process that you've done in the Army. It's very personal.
Yeah.
But take advantage of those organizations. They are there. Exists because we're veterans, helping veterans, and what I'm familiar with most is MOA, and I'm not here to plug them, but a very good organization that you may find some usefulness.
There are a lot of resources available to help veterans with many issues, from mental health, housing, job placement, just all sorts. So you don't have to do it alone.
Right.
Yeah.
And I get a newsletter from the state of Virginia Department of VA. Mm-hmm. I'm sure every state has a Department of VA, and it's another source, like I said, job placement or mental health or health, whatever the issue may be. So take advantage of what is there for you as a veteran.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad you mentioned the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. As we wrap up here, listeners, again, thank you so much for sticking with us through season 2, and we'll be back. We take 2 weeks off during the holidays, but we'll be back with the first episode of season 3. We'll be in January, and our guest for that will be Commissioner Chuck Zingler, the Commissioner of the Virginia Department of Veteran Services. So we're looking really forward to that. Peter, thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
Larry, I've enjoyed it as well.
So for our listeners, we'll see you in January for season 3. Until then, thanks for listening.
The Welcome Home podcast is brought to you by Willing Warriors, a nonprofit organization serving active duty service members and veterans since 2012. To learn more, please visit our webpage at willingwarriors.org.